Miami. We're broadcasting with our affiliate station, Boston Medical TV, up in Boston. And tonight we have the pleasure of having Dan Bacher. Is that correct?
Sure.
Bacher, I'm sorry.
Close enough.
A neuroscientist from at Brown University, a BS and MS, and also joining us is Donald Schwartz. So, Donald, I'll let you introduce yourself first briefly and tell why you're here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Don Schwartz, Vector Spec Marketing up in New Hampshire, and I run the Wearables New England Meetup Group, where I met Dan and kind of focused on wearables in the medical world, I guess, and how wearables can help cost and patient care. And I just want to add that I'm glad to be here tonight and not, with a bunch of better-looking talking heads than the ones on TV talking about politics over and over again tonight. So.
Welcome, man.
Oh, I did want to say, yeah, I've been to Dan's lab down at Brown in Providence, and it's really impressive what they're doing down there. But I'll let Dan tell that.
Sure. So thanks guys for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you tonight. So yeah, my name is Dan Bacher. I'm a researcher in a lab at Brown University, and I'm also, and we'll get into it more, I'm sure, but I also run a small organization called the Speaker Mind Foundation. And really the goal of what we're trying to achieve is to create simple and affordable assistive technology for people with disabilities. And I'll leave it at that for now, but suffice to say that the objective is really to help people in need, and using a variety of different types of technology, both wearable and not wearable. And so I'm looking forward to kind of diving into more of those topics over the next few minutes.
Okay, one question I asked Dan, all the people that come on the show is, when did you first get involved with computers? I mean, was that something that started after your science career started, or were you always into computers? Or were you always a nerd like me?
Good question. I mean, I think I was born an engineer. I think the first toy I ever got, I ripped it apart to see how it worked and then put it back together, or at least tried to put it back together, and I probably didn't do it successfully. But yeah, I think I've been nerding out on computers and technology for a nice long time.
Okay, you basically work with assistive devices for paralyzed individuals, right? Mm-hmm. Right now. Well, can you briefly talk about your work? We talked about it before the show about the sensory device you implanted to have someone actually move an object.
Sure. Yeah, I can briefly touch on. So the lab I work in at Brown, we're developing a medical device to help people with paralysis and limb loss as well. So the basic concept behind it is we place a tiny little chip just onto the surface of the brain for people who are paralyzed. And by recording the signals from the part of the brain that normally, for example, would control their arm and hand, so the motor cortex of the brain, through many, many years of neuroscientific research, we've learned that when someone just imagines or thinks about moving their arm, say, to the right or to the left or up or down, we see a distinct pattern of neural activity coming from that sensor. So with that knowledge of knowing left versus right is different, we can actually use some fancy algorithms to predict and give control to a person who's paralyzed. So in essence, just by thinking about moving a computer cursor to the right or a robotic arm to the right, they can actually do it.
Now, is that an electrical impulse that any sensory device can pick up?
Yeah, so the sensor is actually, it's the size of a baby aspirin. It's 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters. But it has 100 little electrodes on it, and what it's doing is picking up the electrical activity of a small number of neurons or brain cells.
Okay, can you go through your research at the lab? You said you were a brain lab at Brown, correct?
Yep.
And
yeah.
When did? Go ahead.
I was going to say, so yeah, the way this all evolved kind of into Speak Your Mind in particular was, so the participants in the clinical trial where we're testing this medical device, many of them are paralyzed due to conditions such as ALS or have suffered a brainstem stroke or a spinal cord injury. And so I was in this really interesting position of not only working on the technology development side, but I also got to go visit these people in their homes and saw how they were living their lives. And frankly, I was shocked to see how limiting the currently available options were for someone who is paralyzed and can't speak. You know, and there are assistive devices out there. For example, there are these eye gaze tracking systems. So for someone who's paralyzed and can only move their eyes, there were these devices out there. But as I learned from interacting with the people in the trial and their families, you know, these things cost upwards of $17,000. They were antiquated, you know, running Windows XP and still do today. They were really, really clunky and clumsy. They were really complicated to set up. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories of a spouse of someone with a spinal cord injury saying, you know, we tried to use it, but we can never calibrate it, we can never position it properly, and the thing collects dust in the closet.
Wow. Does insurance pay for those at all?
Insurance pays for them sometimes,
Yeah.
and sometimes they only pay for part of it.
Right.
I can tell you from firsthand experience working with the clients we now work with that that process of getting that device reimbursed is not an easy one.
Right.
And in fact, many times people wait months to get the device. And just to put that into perspective for people that are watching, you know, we've when you get to the later stages of ALS, for example, which is a horrible neurodegenerative disease, you know, people have literally died waiting to get their device to be approved.
Wow. Well, yeah, I had a hangout with some guys that built a prosthetic arm for like 1/50th of what it would cost. You know, it cost $25,000, but they built one for $50 with 3D printing. So I guess there's more of that stuff going on around. Now, I guess there's also a problem there's a problem with maintenance of those machines. They break down and forget it. You know, they'll never get fixed. Okay, so when did you start with the? You worked at the Brain Lab for a while, and then I kind of morphed into working with ALS patients and people with strokes, or how'd that work?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, after kind of seeing the current state of affairs in assistive technology, you know, we're seeing these families and through, you know, I said to a few of my engineering buddies, you know, I'm pretty sure that we could build low-cost devices just using off-the-shelf hardware, you know, not even building anything new necessarily, to help these people. And so, you know, one of the first things we built, in fact, I have one laying here. Hold on, I'll put this on while I talk. So one of our participants, he was a guy who was paralyzed from the neck down. He could only move his eyes. And instead of that $15,000 eye tracking system, we built one of these. So this is a $2 pair of glasses that I picked up at the drugstore, some little wire, and a webcam that was $3 on Amazon.
Wow.
And you know, this thing isn't as sophisticated as that $15,000 eye tracker, but this was able to translate someone's eye movements into spelling and communicating with the computer. Just so it plugs into a standard laptop, tracks eye movements on a very rudimentary basis. So this is kind of how it started. It was us saying, I'm pretty sure we can hack together something simple and low cost. And it might even be better than that $15,000 device because it's much simpler. And so with that basic concept, that's kind of how the Speak Your Mind Foundation was born. We started building a couple of these prototypes, and when it kind of started working, we said, you know what, I think we have a model here that could work, that could really help people. And it was exactly that, pulling a webcam, creating an app, and customizing it to meet the needs of the individual to enable them to communicate.
How do you build the program to track the eye movements, or are there programs out there that are made for that type of thing?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people have kind of jumped into doing the DIY eye tracking. We created our own to start, but other people have created software as well. And kind of really exciting too, there are other devices coming out in the market targeted for gamers and market researchers primarily, to do eye tracking. And so for us, that's great, right? We're just going to take it off the shelf and then adapt it to meet the needs of people with disabilities. So it's kind of an exciting time in this world where, on the one hand, this is truly a disenfranchised population of people where an affordable solution just is not available to them. But on the other hand, there's enough technology coming out for other purposes that is encouraging because we can take it and adapt it to help them.
This is kind of, I don't know, maybe this question is kind of further ahead, but do patients, I guess they truly appreciate it, right? You can feel their appreciation from their ability to communicate?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, just to paint the picture, I mean, just imagine that you're paralyzed, you can't move your limbs, you can't speak. And imagine, you're in pain and you wanted to tell someone and you couldn't. Imagine you just had to scratch your nose and you couldn't do it. And you were fully dependent on someone else to come scratch your nose. I mean, it's such a horrifying situation that most of us can't even comprehend what that would be like. And to think that, a few hours of our time, hot gluing a webcam onto a pair of glasses and creating a simple app that would let someone type out, "Can you scratch my nose?" To know that that can make a dramatic impact on someone's quality of life. I mean, I think it's just as meaningful for us to know that we can do that than it is, hopefully, to the people that we're trying to help. But yeah, I can tell you it's been extremely rewarding and fulfilling to be able to make that kind of impact for the small number of people that we have worked with.
Well, Dan, now Don, you may remember the movie Johnny Got Your Gun. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember that, Don? That movie?
I'm not that old.
Okay, well, I am old, and I don't care. But, there was a movie, Dan, it's before your time, 1971, where it really brings you inside the mind of a person. They call it the living dead, essentially, where you can think, you can mentate, but you can't move. See that movie, and anybody watching, Johnny Got Your Gun. It's a book and a movie. It brings you inside what you were just discussing, Dan, about not being able to move, but being able to think normally, but not being able to move at all, or communicate.
Yeah,
I can't imagine it.
There's another great movie out there too called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is adapted from a great book, which was actually written by someone who was locked in, and he typed the whole book just by blinking his eyes with a partner who was dictating. So someone literally was reading each letter of the alphabet, and then he would blink to choose that letter, and he wrote a whole book doing that.
Wow.
Really, really powerful stuff. And yeah, also something to recommend to people if they're interested in this.
What's the name of that again?
Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Okay. Thanks.
Dan, the people, I'm just really curious about their reaction.
Yeah.
Now, how quickly can they get thoughts? Can they just go as fast as they want, or they have to kind of go slowly to communicate? How does that work?
Yeah, it varies very much from person to person, and I think it actually highlights a really important point. One of the reasons why it's hard to create a general purpose assistive technology device is because everyone's different.
Yeah.
Even when you just talk about ALS, for example, people have wildly different abilities and different needs, and that kind of then dictates the type of solution we create for them. But just to give you an example, we had a young woman, her name was Maggie, and she had suffered a brainstem stroke a week before she was going to graduate from college. And doctors told her mom that she was in a vegetative state and would probably never wake up. Fast forward a couple years later, the only thing she can do is very, very subtly move her left eye. That's it. And we were able to build a device that enabled her to simply just say yes or no. That's it. So she would look down and the computer would speak the word yes. it was really slow. But you know what? For someone like her in her condition, that is a huge, huge, huge improvement in quality of life. Even just being able to say yes, even if it's very slow. On the other end of the spectrum, there are people that can move their eyes pretty quickly, and we've had them using eye gaze systems where they can type, a few words per minute. So it's really kind of a relative comparison, not so much an absolute performance kind of metric that we see as being the value add to what we're doing.
Yeah, I guess they're all different levels of severity of each particular neurological syndrome.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, it seems like it must be like many other things where people can adapt, and I wonder if that happens with these people. I know folks that are righties but lose their right arm, all of a sudden their left arm can become good, or you lose your sight and your hearing, and all your other senses just increase. Do you find it the same with that?
Absolutely. In fact, that same young woman I just mentioned, Maggie, they have actually studied her brain over time, and they've actually shown, since she's been using this communication device, that the language centers of her brain have been developing further, have been changing, reorganized. So in neuroscience, we call this concept plasticity, right? The brain will adapt. You hear it all the time in the example, like you said, someone who's blind, their visual cortex actually gets taken over by auditory cortex. So it's when you hear about someone's hearing improves after they've been blind, well, it's because the brain is actually taking over that part to do what it can with it. So yeah, when we think about, and it's kind of strange to think about, but imagine using your eyes to type. It's not a traditional thing you would do. People clearly get better over time with it. People adapt to the devices. So in some weird way, it's kind of, we create adapted technology to leverage what people are capable of, but they also adapt their abilities to use it to the best of their ability.
So you deal mostly numbers-wise with ALS, stroke, traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury. Is there a majority of that you take care of mostly, or is it pretty well spread evenly?
Yeah, that's covers probably the largest segment of people that reach out to us that need our help. But it's been interesting. We've had people reach out to us, children with cerebral palsy, people with muscular dystrophy or multiple sclerosis. We've even had the mothers of children who are nonverbal on the autism spectrum reach out because they just really weren't satisfied with the options for kids with autism. So there's, I guess in a way it highlights how great the need is out there, even if it is a relatively small number of people. I think that's kind of one of the important things to point out. Unfortunately, a company's not going to come out and make a ton of money in this space, and that has been the primary reason why the technology hasn't been successful, frankly.
Well, that's one thing that a computer can do, though. It can bring all these people together very easily at a website like yours. Now, are you mostly in support or research, or both, your organization?
Yeah, we try to do a few things, but I think really our focus, and we can talk about a little more detail, but we really want to create solutions that impact people's lives. And I think when we think about what that means, part of it is providing information. I've had a lot of people contact me and say, my son or daughter has cerebral palsy, for example, and we're looking for a solution.
Okay.
And rather than trying to sell them something we have, I've said, listen, here's what you should do. Get an iPad and download these 2 apps that are already on the App Store. And you know what? I think there's great value in that. I probably saved them a couple of weeks, maybe even months of not having that solution.
Right.
And if we're able to do that, that's a useful service. But more often than not, it's people that are using these really expensive devices and it's not working for them. And frankly, a lot of them, they're so discouraged They're so just grasping for anything to be able to communicate with their loved one. And I think, you know, what we are really focusing on is solving that problem. You know, we want to deliver software using off-the-shelf hardware that will enable someone to control a computer. Because like you just said, you know, think about it. What do you need to be able to interact with the world? A computer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you need to be able to go to school or even to go back to work? You know, it's controlling a computer or a tablet. And so that's where we're really focusing our energy. And I think by working with partners, I think we'll be able to accomplish not only getting these devices out there, but making sure they're properly supported and making sure that we can do the kind of end user customization that we think is necessary to make sure it's successful.
You know, developments of these things that you're doing also needs to be not well publicized to the world of people, of the patients you're making those improvements for. And I find that's one of the good parts about the internet is being able to spread the words of things happening. We have the ability to do that. You know, I was working with a clinic in Africa that was, you know, the #1 killer of the patients was malaria, and they didn't even know that in their country of Zambia, that they have all kinds of organizations that bring anti-malarials and diagnose malaria. They just, because they didn't have a computer. I mean, some things are out there, but the community doesn't know. And you know, maybe the same thing is kind of would apply to your segment of patients that you're talking about. You know, once you have these developments, it's getting the word out that you have simple things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's a unfortunately in this space, there's a really, really bad case of you don't know what you don't know going on.
Right.
And what I mean by that, there are, you know, very well-trained doctors and therapists that work with people who are locked in, who aren't even aware that there exists the kind of technology that we're creating. And that's no fault of their own. You know, a lot of the best stuff out there have been things created by, you know, a guy whose brother is diagnosed with ALS, and he realizes there's nothing out there that can meet his needs, so he writes a piece of software himself. But then that's kind of where it ends. So there's a lot of kind of fragmentation and a lot of people just not being aware of what's out there. So, I mean, because, you know, we're not the only ones trying to create technology to help people with disabilities. And that's why I think, you know, we're set up as a not-for-profit organization. We want to pull all those resources together. And like you said, we need to get the word out there, let people know that there are better solutions than these extraordinarily expensive, I'll call them pieces of junk that don't really help people.
Yeah.
So it's a great point.
On that note, can I ask? I know when I was down at your lab, I saw like half a dozen different platforms, and I think you sat me down in front of a little Windows 8 laptop or something. And I know I was amazed at how easily the eye tracking worked right off the webcam. But what sort of platforms are you working on?
Yeah, you know, in some way, what we've decided to do was whatever was best for the end user. So, you know, it started with, all right, well, let's develop on Windows because it was kind of the easiest thing. But we really needed to be able to mount something on a wheelchair. So we decided to use a Microsoft Surface. I think I showed you a couple of things running on a Surface. So that was great. But, you know, the other thing that we're really excited about, too, are wearables in general. And I think, you know, things like Google Glass, we got one. We started to do development with it. But the basic idea is, you know, right now, if you're someone with ALS in a wheelchair, you know, you have this big tablet mounted on your computer. And say there's an eye tracker mounted on it. You know, it's great because you can be mobile with it. But let's say you and I wanted to have a face-to-face conversation. Instead of me looking at you, I'm looking at a tablet, which is going to type out some words and phrases. And then, you know, I can use text-to-speech so the computer can speak for me. But imagine the use case where I'm wearing Google Glass with an eye tracker mounted on it. So I have a heads-up display showing me what I'm typing. I have a camera tracking my eye movements. Well, I'm actually looking at you and having a true human face-to-face conversation. I think that's where we get really excited about wearables and things like Google Glass, even if it's not glass, but something like that, to really bring back the human experience of communication to people who are paralyzed.
Well, are there any, going back to the support groups, are there any support groups that you keep in contact with for something like ALS? Any groups that kind of watch you and want to hear what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the ALS Association is a fantastic organization, and you know, everyone's seen the Ice Bucket Challenge and saw how much money they've raised, but they really do critically important work for people with ALS, and they, you know, we interact with them regularly. They recommend or send clients our way for people who might need some help, and you know, there are countless other small groups that are trying to help people with disabilities. You know, Easter Seals is an example of one, where they have services that they have that will, you know, help on the technology side, help on the care end, do whatever they can to help people.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I see Ned is there, but not really there. I see an LG.
Ned is there, not really there, and I have no idea why there's an inverted LG in my
Oh,
stead.
there's a Ned. Ned, is that you? LG? That must be his nickname, LG.
Yeah, but you know what happened in Vegas, I really can't even remember, so it'll stay in Vegas.
I found out that I had to say that I had to use Firefox instead of Chrome in order to do this right. So Dan, I know we all want to see this challenge thing, the Ice Bucket.
You ready for that, Dan?
Yeah, please.
Why don't you tell the story about it? I mean, this guy, which is Steve Sailing, right?
Yeah, I'll give you the backstory. So everyone has seen the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, I'm sure. If you haven't, then you probably don't have a computer and you wouldn't be on this Hangout. So, but yeah, you know, we were watching all these Ice Bucket Challenges happening, and kind of came to the realization that, you know, this is great what it's doing. It's raising awareness. It's raising money. But someone who's paralyzed due to ALS cannot be a part of this challenge. They can't do it themselves. They can't lift an ice bucket and dump it on themselves or dump it on someone else. And so we got to thinking, you know, it'd be really cool if we built some kind of gizmo to enable someone who's paralyzed with ALS to actually dump the bucket on someone else. And so we did that. We call it the eye bucket. And you know, Steve Sailing, who is a really amazing guy, really inspirational guy. You know, he lives up in Chelsea, Mass. He lives in this ALS residence that he actually helped build, and it's, I think, the world's most technologically advanced ALS residence. So, you know, with this thing, he's got, you know, from his assistive technology, he can open the doors, he can control the elevators, he can control his lights and the TV and everything.
Wow.
And so when we first mentioned the idea to him of, I was like, hey, Steve, you know, you want to dump a bucket of ice on me just using your eye movements? He loved it. He was so excited for it. And, you know, we were honored to have him be a part of it because I think he's a great example of someone who's not letting ALS limit him living a quality life. And so, yeah, this video is just kind of summarizes. We put a pair of glasses on him with the camera, same kind of thing that I talked about. And when he looks up, it triggers a little servo, a little motor, that's holding the bucket in place. And as you'll see, I got soaked.
Okay, this hopefully will be smooth. So here we go. Hold on.
ALS is a horrible disease.
Not saying it. There it is.
And left me unable to
Did you see
speak,
it?
and I will be this way until I die.
Blue box yourself, John, so we see it.
Technology is available that can restore much of what ALS has taken away. There are geniuses out there, like the Speak Your Mind Foundation, who can dramatically improve the quality of life for people with ALS. Until medicine proves otherwise, technology is the cure.
Alright, so what's going to happen is using an eye tracker that develops the assisted looking up, so that you get a trigger and that's not going to find water. What's up?
A true scientist.
I would like to challenge Mick Ebling from the Not Possible Foundation, the Social Enterprise Greenhouse down in Providence, and I'd also like to issue a special challenge to all of the makers, hackers, designers, engineers, and tinkerers out there to build your own crazy rig of some kind to dump a bucket of water on your head.
Hey.
Nice.
That's great.
There it is.
That was one take?
Just one. Well, you kidding me? We couldn't have done it again. I was soaked.
That was done the first take, huh?
First try. You know, it was really funny. We
Just switch your screen back, John. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, for the for the techies out there, eye trackers are sensitive to lighting conditions, and it was cloudy and the sun was coming in and out, and so a little nervous that it was going to falsely trigger and dump on me at the wrong time, but fortunately everything worked. We only had to do one take because that ice water was pretty damn cold.
I've heard sometimes having 10 or 11 takes. You're lucky.
One take, just one take.
Bingo.
That's the precision of Speak Your Mind engineering.
So what do you foresee? Right now you're working full tilt on the assistive devices. You foresee continuing to do that, or expanding, or going somewhere else, or what do you foresee?
Yeah, so kind of what we've done over the last year or so is, in a way, we kind of went back to first principles. We kind of really, very, very basic, went back and asked, what do these types of devices need to be able to do, and what would be the most affordable and simplest way of creating them and delivering them? And so our plan now that we've kind of done enough of these kind of one-off prototypes, is we're building a single assistive technology platform where we're going to be, think of it as a systems integration platform, where we have eye tracking, head tracking, switch input, really anything that will allow someone with a disability to control a computer. We're integrating it all into one platform, one software package. And embedded in that package, we're going to be able to do things like let someone use email, control the mouse, so you could kind of control any native applications, do some environmental control, and really just do anything someone wants to do on a computer. Our objective is to do it. So that's what we're working on right now, the platform approach. Eventually, because we really, our objective is to help as many people as possible, and we think that if we can build this platform right and get it out there to the world, that a bunch of other talented engineers and designers and tinkers out there can help us help more people.
Okay. Okay, Don. Any last minute questions for Dan?
How cold was the ice? He really did just, all he did was glance up and it went.
Yeah, we made it so they had to hold his eyes up for about 2 seconds, or actually a little less than that, just to make sure that we didn't get a false trigger. But that was it. That was the first. We did a couple dry runs like you saw in the video, but yeah, all he had to do was just look up towards the sky for a second, and that triggered the bucket.
Awesome. I do have one question though. Is how can people support your foundation? Because I think you're doing absolutely incredible things, and I know millions and millions are going to the ALS Foundation. I think it'd be nice to see some go to your foundation to help your work too. So.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I think yeah, anyone watching this, if you think what we're doing, whether you think it's noble or not, or whether you know anyone with ALS or not, please consider making a donation. You know, I think our objective is to directly help people by building technology and improving their quality of life. And you know, there are a few different ways of supporting people with ALS, for example. People have been donating to the ALS Association, and you should continue to do that. But we are directly improving people's quality of life. And so if you'd like to make a donation or even learn more about what we do, please go to speakyourmindfoundation.org. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions about what we're doing. And yeah, please make a donation. We're a not-for-profit organization. We rely completely on you guys supporting our work. And so every dollar helps, and I can guarantee you that we'll make good use of that money.
Awesome.
Very good, Dan. A very worthy cause. And Don, thanks for coming out tonight. And Dan, stick around after I stop the broadcast. We'll talk. Like you said, it's important to get support groups together, and maybe we can help you do that and get the community together, because internet's a good tool to use. So good night, gentlemen.
Good night.
Stuff.
Good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.